Conversations happening still throughout the day. In this segment, Professor Dunia Prince Zongwe, Associate Professor of School of Law, will be joining us a bit later on to provide insight on Dr. Sam Nujoma's contribution to Namibia's constitution. We'll also be joined by Jovelina Imperial Acosta, Ambassador of Angola to Namibia. She'll be discussing Angola's message of condolence and, of course, the strong ties between the two countries. We also have Christian Stiebel, who is a photographer. He'll be joining us to share his experiences capturing the legacy of Sam Nujoma through photography. But later on, Dr. Charles Mubita, rector of the SWAPO Party School, will join us to reflect on the political legacy of Dr. Sam Nujoma and his influence on the SWAPO Party. Mr. Rui Chitende, political analyst, will also be in studio. He'll be exploring Dr. Sam Nujoma's transformation from liberation leader to nation builder and his enduring impact on Namibia. Not forgetting Mike Kovekatora, president of the Rally for Democracy and Progress, that's the RDP, will join us later on to discuss Dr. Sam Nujoma's role in Namibia's independence struggle and his legacy in post-liberation politics. Well, that is what we've got lined up for you. We're going to take a very brief break. When we come back, we begin our conversations.
During this brief period, since our independence, we have been able to ensure peace within our borders, create confidence about the future among all Namibians, and set an agenda for reconstruction and democracy. All of this we have been able to do in spite of the recent past in Namibia characterized by conflict and bloodletting.
The Republic of Namibia has adopted a policy of mixed economy. That means we encourage joint ventures with our government and private sector. I have already signed an agreement with the OPEC in Washington when I was here 3 months ago. And in that, in fact, there is a guarantee now of the U.S. corporates as well as private investors to come and invest in Namibia. So the reason why we have adopted a policy of mixed economy, this would encourage us to create job opportunities to our people as well as to develop our economy with the participation of the private sector from overseas as well as national business concern. It is very important to produce adequate food for the population because we cannot afford to import foodstuffs from other countries. And second is water and rural development. Our country is a very dry country. It's always affected by droughts, and therefore we have to develop water canals and a pipeline from the Kunene and the Zambezi rivers into the interior of the country.
Sam Nujoma, born on May 12, 1929 in Oranjera, Ovamboland, was a pivotal figure in Namibia's fight for independence. He co-founded the Ovamboland People's Organization in 1959 and later the Southwest Africa People's Organization in 1960, leading the nation to independence from South African rule in 1990. Nujoma served as Namibia's first president from 1990 to 2005, emphasizing national reconciliation and the establishment of democratic institutions. He passed away on February 8, 2025 at the age of 95. Christian Stebo, a renowned Namibian photographer, had the unique opportunity to document some private moments of Sam Nujoma and his family over the years. He now joins us this afternoon to share his story. Christian, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, Nina, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being here. To start with, Christian, can you share your first experience meeting our former president, founding father, Dr. Sam Nujoma?
If I remember correctly, the first time I met the founding father was at some event that I think it was a graduation ceremony at the University of Namibia, and he was the chancellor of the university at that time. And it was my task now to set up a group photo of all the dignitaries. We set up a whole studio, and you know as it is, you set everybody else up first because now the founding is coming. So you've got a huge commotion. You've obviously got your security personnel, etc. And he was more than a friendly person. He didn't have any allures. He was like easy to deal with. I think we got the shot done within a few minutes. So that was quite nice and easy.
Other than what you've just mentioned, what were your actual first impressions, about him?
He came across as a very humble person. He did not give me a hard time. I think he was at that time he already had the aura of an elder statesman. Mind you, I only met him after he had already relinquished office.
Right.
Yeah, he was not the president anymore for quite a few years. So he was a very pleasant elder statesman, and didn't give me a hard time in taking photos of him.
Well, over the years, of course, you encountered him, many times to be able to take pictures of him and his family and so on. And what was that relationship like over the years as it evolved?
I think I don't want to exaggerate, because if you say a relationship, that I'm not a family friend, right? I'm a photographer. Yes. I click buttons, and hopefully everybody is happy with the result afterward. But if they weren't, I wouldn't get hired, so let's knock on wood. But I must say, he's always been very generous with his time, even. I remember there was a time I came to his private residence to take photos of the family, of the whole Nujoma family, which was a
large family.
A large family, indeed. Yeah, the sons were there, the grandchildren were there, the great. It was like a big event. It's like a family reunion, or family get-together. It was quite impressive, and that was kind of a moment where I'm thinking, okay, I'm a humble photographer. I'm a tradesman. I'm here in the midst of this family home. You've got on the walls there are photos of very important people. You've got like Nelson Mandela, etc., who visited. You've got all these things. You are here, so this is kind of history is touching you a little bit. Yeah. And that was actually a really nice moment where I got to interact a little bit more. Yes. He was there, and the whole family.
Well, you must have made an impression on him, because you invited to stay for a bride at the end. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, indeed. That was quite interesting. It was completely unexpected. After we had concluded with the photo session, and we actually took the first few shots at the residence, and then went out with, let me say, the younger part of the family. We went out into nature a bit, right next there in Avis. We took a few photos, and they said, okay, now let's go back to the residence, and please join us. We're going to have like a bit of a luncheon. And it was, I don't remember what day of the week it was. It was late afternoon anyway, and meet was bride. And that was, I must say, is one of the more memorable experiences of my career, because you sit at a table with this founding father of the nation. And you're thinking back, that was in 2019. So that was.
Did you get to ask him any questions?
I don't, I don't want to obtrude. I try to keep myself back. By nature, I'm an observer, right? It was great for me to be there. I chatted with him a little bit, not as much as I did with late President Gengo, by the way, who was also interesting and would sometimes respond in German. But it was just being in that moment for me was a really big reward. And when you think back, that is a moment that would have been impossible just 30 years back.
100%.
And to see then how, just at that time, elder statesman got up from the table and everybody started singing struggle songs. That was just like something that was, for me, it went to the heart. Yeah. And it made me appreciate very much the work that he did for reconciliation in this country, to make sure that Namibians of all creeds, of all skin colors, can come together and really build a nation.
Well, you've taken many photos of him, as I mentioned, but today you've only shared a couple, and you shared the reason with me privately, but I'd like you to tell the public and why you specifically chose only a few pictures to share, other than, of course, that you were pressed for time.
Yeah, well, I'm not a press photographer, right? I'm not part of the media. If you hire me to take photos, then I will do it, and I will deliver the photos to you. You pay me for my time or for my expertise, and you receive those images. At that moment, I feel it's not up to me to share these images with the public. I would not have wanted to share with the public now any of those images that I took.
For the family.
For the family, because they are their family photos, and it's not my right. I need to respect their privacy.
Yeah.
And that's something that I also want all my clients to. They need to know that.
Yeah. You shared a couple with us, and in one of the photos I saw that he was wearing, of course, a gown and a cap and gown, and former President Pohamba was also with him in that picture. So just talk to us about what was happening on that day.
This, I think, was again at the University of Namibia, if I remember correctly. That must have been at Safari. Sorry, it was then Safari Court Hotel. It's now Movenpick. So it was a graduation ceremony, and obviously Namibia first establishing its university was a big thing, and him as the chancellor of the university was the figurehead of that institution. And his successor in office, President Pohamba, was also there. And I think the photos that I shared with you, they were rather formal. There were a few more ones where they were just like joking around with the university, with the members of the council and the Senate. So it was a bit more of a behind-the-scenes moment, actually, not in the big hall, but in a holding room.
Yeah. Is there a particular photograph of Nujoma that you took that stands out to you with a special story behind it?
Let me curve around your question a little bit, because the one photo of him that actually stands out for me, it's not a photo that I took. It's the photo that was taken. And to my shame, I don't know who took it. I'd have to look it up now. It's taken when he returned to Namibia after exile. And he arrived at the airport in Windhoek.
In 1989, yeah.
In 1989, yeah. And he kissed the soil, the Namibian soil, for the first time after being back from exile. And I believe that just so much speaks to that goal that he achieved, and that this country has achieved, that it wouldn't have without him. Just finally being back and finally having free elections and majority rule.
Well, what did you learn about the founding father, former President Nujoma, during your sessions that the public might not be aware of?
I've learned that he was a very relaxed person. He came, when you could approach him as soon as you were past that security layer that you would have to get into, but you're obviously then at that point vetted, etc., I suppose. He was pretty easygoing, he was friendly, and he did not portray that image of a stern father, but rather at that time I would think he was more like a bit more of a gentle grandfather.
Yeah. How do you believe your photographs, contribute, Christian, to the legacy of Sam Nujoma?
I believe that his legacy stands without my help. He doesn't need my images for that. If I can contribute to just documenting some of it, then I would be very happy. But I believe his legacy way surpasses anything that I can do to contribute.
And has documenting, his life through these pictures impacted your own journey as a photographer?
It has in a way, because the first time you meet a person of that caliber, and that goes, I've now taken photos of all the 4 presidents that we have had so far. Nujoma was the first one there, and once you have done that, you realize you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily want to be like Your Excellency, etc., but they're people, and you've got a job to do with them at that moment, so you just do it. And I believe that has helped me quite a bit in just being less nervous when you were in that kind of situation. Because the first time I was like, I must admit, obviously I think everybody would feel the same, it's a little bit of an adrenaline kick.
Yeah. Have you taken pictures of former President Pohamba and former President Geinkop?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. I also want to know, of course, as a photographer, yes, you have a job to do, and you've shared with us what the experience was like with Dr. Sam Nujoma. But in terms of him being a leader in, in Namibia, you mentioned also that when you initially met him, he had not been president for a few years by then. But I want to know your thoughts in terms of the type of leader that he was in Namibia, the change that he's brought, the foundation that we enjoy today. What are your thoughts on the man as a leader?
I cannot speak to interior politics because I only came to Namibia in 2010. I'm German-born. Namibia has been very warm and welcoming to me, but I've been only here since 2010. So what I can speak to...
So you arrived in what we'll call a free and fair Namibia.
Absolutely,
course,
and I'm actually happy about that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I'm German-speaking, right? If I had grown up in Namibia, it might have been... It's tougher.
Yeah.
Because as Germans, we've got a different sort of ballast when it comes to Namibia, right? But I did not grow up here during apartheid. And for that, I'm actually grateful because it makes it sometimes easier to approach people. Yeah. Also, I grew up in a very liberal household. So for me, obviously, I do my research. I read a lot about history. Namibia is, especially when it comes to Germany, is a very special case. Yeah. But what I'd like to say is, I think he was the right person at the right time, and he was magnanimous in a way that he was able to unite this country and actually forge a nation. And that is something that I think you have to really highly, highly appreciate. Because it would have been easy at that time to go in a totally different direction.
100%.
And I think we, as Namibians, we are really... If we have seen how easily or how well our democratic processes work, there's a little bit of sand in the gears here and there, but generally speaking, we had such a smooth transition after the tragic demise of President Gengop. How quickly these institutions work,
yes.
And how, our democratic processes, they work.
Yeah.
We've got the rule of law. We've got our courts that have their say when it's necessary. And the government adheres to it.
Yeah.
So that is something we can be proud of, and I believe that's one of the big legacies of President Nujoma.
I couldn't agree more. Christian, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you. Well, that was photographer Christian Stiebel speaking to us about his experience with the founding father and former president, Dr. Sam Nujoma. We'll be right back after this brief break. Our conversations will continue.
Let the initiative of the five be clarified and brought back into perspective. Let the five, SWAPO, and South Africa continue to engage in further talks to resolve the outstanding issues in order to reach an agreement so that the settled matter can be brought before the Security Council for its consideration. The situation as it stands now is that in addition to the crucial issues of Walvis Bay, location of South African resurgent forces, and the role of the UN, there are these new elements which, rather than simplifying the situation, have further complicated it. As for the illegal South Africa regime of military occupation, its colonial commitment is to perpetuate its grip on Namibia in utter defiance of the UN authority and with manifest aggression against our people.
Well, yesterday our colleague Ricardo Kwagosep spoke to Professor Dunia Prince Zongwe, Associate Professor at the School of Law, Faculty of Commerce. They spoke on Namibia's founding president, Dr. Sam Nuyoma's contribution to the Constitution. Let's have a look at that interview.
Less than an hour before the Namibian Constitution turned 35 years old, Namibia's founding president, Dr. Sam Nujoma, passed away. Under Nuyoma's guidance, late President Hage led the Constituent Assembly. They had the mammoth assignment to craft the Namibian Constitution within approximately 80 days. Today, 35 years ago, the supreme law of the land was born, having paved the way for what was to become the constitutional dispensation some 6 weeks later. This evening, this special tribute broadcast honoring the life and legacy of Dr. Nujoma to the Constitution, constitutional democracy, as well as the rule of law. Greetings to you, Namibia. I'm Ricardo Kwagosep. Now, I'm joined in studio just for this engagement by one of course, our scholars, academics in the field of law. That is Professor Dunia Prince Zongwe, Associate Professor at the School of Law at the Faculty of Commerce, Management and Law at the University of Namibia, to really reflect on this important day and the contributions by the late president in terms of constitutional democracy and the development of the rule of law. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much, Professor, for making time out to join us.
Yes, good evening, and thank you very much for having me.
Well, Prof, of course, we had initially planned to have this conversation to really just focus on Constitutional Day when we were met with this news early in the morning of the passing of the late president. Perhaps how did the news find you, and what were some of your initial reactions to it?
Well, I mean, the founding father, President Sam Nujoma, was, like I've just said, the founding father. So my first thought was that this is a great loss. Also because President Nujoma was also the father of constitutionalism. We take this for granted, but if you look around on the continent and elsewhere in the global south, you notice that countries have constitutions, but they do not have constitutionalism.
I think just draw a parallel for us between those two. Just, you have the constitution, but what exactly constitutionalism itself means?
Well, it's not the same thing. The Constitution is a written document that, on this, for example, Constitution Day we are going to talk about, the one that was adopted on this very day 35 years ago. But constitutionalism is about constraining the power of government, of the executive or the state. And this, to understand the contrast between the Constitution and constitutionalism, you have to look at jurisdiction like the United Kingdom, where they do not have a written constitution, but they do have constitutionalism. So there's a number of constitutional conventions that restrain the power of the state. So on this day, 35 years ago, Namibia had a written constitution, but it was not a given that the state would have complied with the provisions of the Constitution. So it is a true, I think it's a recognition of President Nuyoma's legacy, that he chose, because it is a choice, and a courageous one, he chose to abide by the provisions of the Constitution, even though, for example, in some cases, the decisions of the courts did not favor the government. So that's why I'm saying that in terms of the Constitution, there was constitutional leadership. He was the chief implementer of the Constitution. And as an academic from the University of Namibia, I should also highlight the fact that President Nujoma was also the founding chancellor of the university, and in that capacity, he really steered the university in the early stages. And at the inception of the university, even made this declaration that he hoped that the university would bring together dedicated women and men of quality who would help uplift the living standards of the Namibian people.
Well, some would, Prof. Zongwe, some would contend that it is far from insignificant that the former president, of course, passed on the anniversary, the 35th anniversary of the Constitution of the Republic. Let's take a step back and reflect on its drafting and how it was put together. Of course, we know initially when the Constituent Assembly was formed, there was really no constitution. There were different varieties going around. Each political party had its own. And finally, they adopted to say, look, okay, let's rather take the draft of SWAPO party and then build on that as well. Let's talk about just the Constitution and the Constituent Assembly and how it was put together. And of course, different representatives, different political parties, different ideologies. Just reflect a little bit on how they came together, the Constituent Assembly, and just that responsibility of making sure that we need to find common ground on many of the issues that were included in the Constitution.
Well, it's an interesting historical moment in the sense that I remember even Professor Disho in his book, The Namibian Constitution in Perspective, raised this issue in the sense that already before the Constituent Assembly, before it was put in place, the Western Contact Group, which was a group of Western countries, the United States, Canada, the UK, France,
UK, USA,
and
France, I think,
exactly. They had adopted on the Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter, they had adopted what is called today the 1982 Constitutional Principles. Those were that was the basic architecture of the Namibian Constitution. It's true, like you said, that the SWAPO Constitution also was heavily influenced the Constitution, but the basic architecture was already decided. The question was that because it was decided by countries other than Namibia, to what extent we could say that the Namibian Constitution was written by Namibians. So the process itself of drafting the Constitution took about 80 days. It was considered to be a bit rushed compared to the Constitution making process in other jurisdictions, but it nonetheless produced a Constitution that is regarded as one of the most progressive on the continent. So the chairperson of the Constituent Assembly was the late President Hage Geingob. There were 21 members in that committee, 6 women, and their job was to draft. They were responsible for the drafting of the Constitution, but it's important to note that the actual drafting was not done by that committee. It was done by 3 South African lawyers, Arthur Chaskalson, Erasmus, and Marinus Viras. So those 3 lawyers did the actual drafting, but the conception was done as early as 1982. And then it was improved by the SWAPO Constitution and the input of the members of the Constituent Assembly. Yes. So another, since we are reflecting on the legacy of the founding president, Sam Nujoma, it's also important to mention that one of the achievements that he made was to basically make the Constitution, make people assimilate the Constitution, make it their own, because it was not evident. As I said, the book that I was referring to by Professor Disho was written in 1992, and then at the time already there were questions as to the extent to which the Constitution reflected Namibia, the priorities of Namibians, etc., etc. So,
in terms of that, I think one of the most important things that I really take from the Constitution is the preamble.
Yes.
And the preamble really takes it. I want to really quote it because I don't want to get it wrong. Whereas the recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is indispensable for freedom, justice, and peace. And becoming sort of like a cornerstone of the Constitution. Talk to us about the importance of the preamble and it laying the foundation for this new nation that is being born.
Well, the preamble has an important role, especially in the interpretation of the Constitution itself, and in also reciting the foundational values of the Namibian society. You mentioned justice and peace. The very first article of the Namibian Constitution, Article 1, Sub-Article 1, makes it very clear that the Namibian state is founded on 3 principles: rule of law, justice for all, and democracy. So the idea of justice is very important, and it's again reflected in the preamble. There is also other, the preamble also recites, it gives the historical background of
where we come from as a people why it has to be structured in this particular manner.
Exactly, apartheid, etc., etc., and also its adherence to global standards such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Yes.
Talking about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it's also one of, if you look at chapter 3 that speaks about those inalienable human rights,
yes.
a very distinct feature that was put into the Constitution as well. We know, of course, it's a very, very special chapter because you cannot amend those rights negatively. You can only amend them positively. Talk to us a little bit about the inclusion of that, looking at the historical or the history of the country and of the history of oppression and where we came from as a people.
Well, chapter 3 embodies the struggle, the liberation struggle, and the things that we're fighting for: dignity, equality, and other values like personal liberty, given the arbitrary arrests that took place during the apartheid areas. It cannot be, like you say, negatively changed. The provisions of chapter 3 are also entrenched, although one of the points I remember even one of my lecturers was mentioning was that, when I was a student, was the fact that the entrenchment clause of the Namibian constitution itself is not entrenched. So that's the irony. So somebody can change that entrenchment clause and so forth. But it's not likely that the courts will accept that because it's very clear what were the intentions of the framers of the Namibian constitution and the members of the Constituent Assembly. So yes, it is entrenched and cannot be changed. Unless theoretically the constitution itself were to be replaced by another constitution.
Well, if you look at it, there, I think a couple of provisions that I wanted us to just pay a bit of special attention to as we're reflecting on Constitution Day. We know very, very important one, of course. Article 1 speaks about the establishment of the state, but Article 6 speaks about the protection of life. Looking at where we are coming from, of course, the question around capital punishment was also quite a big one. And I understand it was a serious debate with the Constituent Assembly where they even had to bring in the Council of Churches of Namibia really to contribute to inclusion of this clause. Reflect a little bit on that one for us around the protection of life and why that was one of those big debates during the drafting or the framing of the Constitution.
Well, the protection of life was, again, for historical reasons and again, with the input of different stakeholders, they decided not to include the death penalty. And I would even add that it's also a reflection of African ethos and Namibian ethos in the sense that if you think, for example, of it in terms of Ubuntu, life is sacred. And combined with the idea of human dignity, you would understand why the Constituent Assembly eventually decided not to have the death penalty. Life imprisonment is punishment enough from that perspective. And the idea of Ubuntu had two major aspects, the one of humaneness and humanness. And those are the values that eventually, when they were discussing about whether to keep Article 6, whether to keep the death penalty or remove it, those were the values that and the considerations that they took into account in coming to the decisions of not including the death penalty.
Quite important ones, of course, and really also reflection of the time was Article 11 and 12. 11 talking about arrest and detention and fair trial. Quite important because of what was happening with the security forces, the internal security forces, of course, the police were the enforcers on behalf of the apartheid government. And in Article 12, it really speaks distinctively around, providing very detailed, 48 hours you have to appear before a court of law. Your family, even in a criminal procedure, having the authority now to, if they haven't seen your body, for example, if you've been detained, family even has the right under the habeas corpus maxim to be physically shown the body, for example, of someone that has been detained. Talk to us a little bit around how some of those provisions were very detailed and practical, but were necessary when they were included.
Well, it was necessary once again because of the history of the systematic discrimination that took place during the apartheid days, where black Namibians would be arrested arbitrarily. Article 11 and Article 12 actually reflect global standards. If you look at the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, you will find those same standards, the habeas corpus, the privilege against self-incrimination, the presumption of innocence. All these standards are found in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is a UN treaty. Those global standards influenced Article 11 and 12, but they are not the only source, substantive source of those articles. History, the Namibian history, and the abuse of the state power also informed the inclusion of Article 11 and 12 in the Constitution. Let me also mention that the 1982 constitutional principles, in the principles that they were advocating for the Namibian Constitution, there were also guarantees around the Bill of Rights and fair trial. So yes, those are the different sources that influenced, substantive sources that influence Article 11 and 12. Yes.
In terms of that, quite an interesting thing is, of course, also because it also places, particularly for Article 12, it places a burden of responsibility on the government as well. Because if you cannot afford legal representation, then one will be provided for you, obviously, at state expense, basically. Talk to us about how that the access to justice for all Namibians.
Well, yes, it helps in terms of access to justice, but let's say that the budget of the Directorate of Legal Aid, as we know, is not sufficient. But when you talk about representation, legal representation, I think the leading case here is the Mulima case that was decided by the Supreme Court. And in that case, the court decided that because of the complexity of the case, the great number of accused involved, and the interest of justice, then the Namibian government had duty to provide them with legal representation. I mean, this is another piece of evidence of the legacy that President Nujoma has left behind, the idea of constitutionalism, where the judiciary tells the government that here, if you do not provide legal representation, there would be a miscarriage of justice. And the government, despite the fact that the Akapivi accused were basically challenging the constitutional order, the government nonetheless complied with the court order. And that is one of the legacies in terms of constitutionalism that both the founding president, President Nujoma, and the late President Gengob have left behind.
Prof. Zongwe, you spoke, I think, at the beginning when you were explaining the importance of constitutionalism, really that it's putting a limitation on state power. And we see that with the establishment of the state, the three branches of government, executive, legislature, as well as judiciary. We know the one important thing, and one of the problematic issues or issues that were being debated is whether the president should be a ceremonial president or an executive president. But let's talk to us a little bit around the selection was to go with the executive president, but to put limitations on the power, or the separation of the branches, the three branches of government, legislature, judiciary, and executive. Talk to us a little bit around the importance of that separation of power and the legacy that the president leaves behind by adhering to, like you said, some of the outcomes from the judiciary, some of the decisions that are made by legislature, etc., during his tenure as president.
Yes, it has a long history when you think about the separation of powers, although, like I quickly mentioned, the Namibian judiciary has yet to come up with a coherent doctrine of the separation of powers. It has a long history, but one of the famous formulations was by the French jurist Montesquieu, who said that in order to basically constrain prevent the arbitrariness of power, you needed to separate state power into three branches, judicial, legislative, and executive. And it's also reflected in the provisions of the Namibian Constitution, including Article 1.3, that talks about the different branches of the Constitution. So regarding the executive powers, as you said, the president in Namibia is not a ceremonial president, it's an executive president. And the powers of the president were increased with the Third Amendment in 2014. Yeah. So it is a powerful president, but its power, his or her power are actually constrained by the legislature and the judiciary. And the judiciary on several occasions and several decisions have, for example, held the decisions made by the president to be unlawful or illegal. So I remember that one of the recent cases involved the regulations, the proclamation made to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Namibian Federations of Employers Federation took a case to court in order to have some of these provisions declared unconstitutional. And this is just an example among many of how the judiciary checked and balanced the powers of the executive. Yes.
I think the one thing I really want to just touch on before we close off our conversation really is the amendment of the Constitution. And generally they say that, look, it's a living document, of course, but you don't want to, because it's a supreme law and there's, even from an interpretation of statute perspective, you don't want it to be touched too much. Just to reflect a little bit on we had only 3 amendments so far to the Constitution. If you can reflect to it within international best practice, where we stand as a country and whether it really shows the quality of the document that we have, for lack of a better word.
Yes, well, if I were to start with the last point that you made in terms of, let's say, global, comparisons, Namibia fares pretty well. I mean, if you think about it, research conducted by empirical research conducted by American scholars showed that the average age or life expectancy of a constitution is about 19 years. 19 years, and the Namibian constitution has turned today 35 years. So that already shows you that by global standards, Namibia is doing fairly well. In Europe, it's 32 years, the average, and Namibia is 35. It's another, it's another piece of evidence showing that about the, let's say, the maturity, the constitutional maturity of the Namibian leadership, but also the political stability. In Africa, there's only 3 countries that have older constitutions, and that is Botswana in 1966. That's when it was adopted. Mauritius, 1968. And also Tanzania in 1977. So this longevity is rare in Africa. So in Africa, the average age for the constitution before it gets changed is about 10 years. To give you an example, between 1960 and, to date, a country like the Democratic Republic of the Congo had about 7 constitutions. In 35 years, Namibia had only 1 constitution. So it is evidence that Namibia is politically stable. It has a constitutional democracy because a dictatorship will not be able to keep a constitution for that long. So yes, so by global standards, the Namibian constitution is pretty remarkable. So it is. It's one of the legacies. I mean, if we were even to sum up this conversation and say what is the sign or the marker that the founding president Sam Nujoma and the late President Gengob have achieved in their task to create a stable and inclusive society, it would be the fact that the constitution has lived for so many years. We shouldn't take it for granted. Just look around when the constitutions were adopted in different countries, on other continents as well, and you'll see that 35 years, it's remarkable.
It's quite a time.
It's quite, yes.
Prof. Zongwe, thank you so much for making time out to join me.
Okay, thank you very much for having me on the show.
Well, what you were just watching was our colleague Ricardo Kwahuseb in conversation with Professor Dunia Zongwe, speaking on our founding president, Dr. Sam Nujoma's contributions to the Constitution. We're going to take a brief break, have a look at the news highlights, and we'll be back after that. Stay with us.
We cannot sit idle while many of our people still bear the burden of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. I can think of no more noble objective to pursue than the realization of the aspirations of our people to be self-reliant and to depend on their native intelligence and labor in order to transform their dreams into reality.
Good afternoon, and it's time for your 4 o'clock news highlights here on NBC with me, Reinhilde Osiku. Thank you for joining us. Ben Nangombe, the Executive Director in the Ministry of Health and Social Services, served as late Dr. Sam Nuyoma's speechwriter. Nangombe described Nujoma as a charismatic and principled man of note who held freedom and independence dear to his heart.
I returned from school with my first degree. I joined government service in 1994 at the Ministry of Mines and Energy. And there was a meeting held at State House. The Minister of Mines and Energy at that time was Herman Andiba Toivo. So I was invited to that meeting, and that is when I met him for the first time. Then in 1995, I joined the staff of State House while President Nujoma was president as policy analyst. And one of the jobs of policy analyst was to conduct research that went into the drafting of the president's speeches and statements. My supervisor at that time was Comrade Daniel Smith. So as the time went on, 1995, 1996, there was the Windhoek show. That time, the Windhoek agricultural show was a big thing, and the president actually went to address that. And at that occasion, I was given the full responsibility now to write his speech for that show. And that is the first one that I actually wrote for President Nujoma.
Was it a nerve-wracking experience for you?
It was quite a nerve-wracking experience. I still remember when the speech was finally done, I had to go to the president. It was on a Saturday. I was called from home Saturday afternoon. The president had gone through the statement. He had some points to add. And that is really where the journey started. And it went on until he then retired as president in 2005. And the experience was quite humbling in a way. President Nujoma is a man who was principled. You will remember that, this was a transition from a liberation movement into a government. So the style and the expressions had to somewhat address the realities of the situation. As much as President Nujoma was a charismatic man, was a principled man. For example, when we are writing his speeches and we are referring to, for example, freedom and independence, it's not only freedom and independence. You have to emphasize this genuine freedom and independence, because this is something he held dearly, and he felt that, we did not only have paper freedom and independence, it must be genuine, felt by all Namibians, and having a meaning to all Namibians. So he was a unique individual.
And as more tributes pour in, Omaheke Regional Governor Pio Nganate joined the nation in paying their last respects to the fallen founding president and father of the Namibian nation. Let's listen in.
Allow me to pass my sincere condolences to the President of the Republic of Namibia, Comrade Nangolo-Mbumba, our first monarch, also to his entire cabinet and to our President-elect, the nation at large, our First Lady, Ovamboland Nujoma, the children, Comrade Tony Nujoma and Saki Nujoma, and my dear sister, Usuta Nujoma, with the passing on of our president, our very, very first president, Comrade Sam Shafishuna Nujoma. The death of Comrade Sam Shafishuna Nujoma is a great loss to this nation. It's a great loss to the nation since Comrade Sam Shafishuna Nujoma loved the soil of this country very, very much. And that could be seen by the first act when he arrived in this country. It was to kiss the soil. Comrade Sam Nujoma was a principled man, a visionary man, a man who was first a human being before becoming a president. Remembered for so many things, among other, his closeness to human beings. He would never want to sleep in a hotel or at a place far from the people. He would always want to be home with the people that he came to visit. I was fortunate and lucky to have hosted Comrade Sam Nujoma several times at my dwelling, by then as mayor of Gobabes, and I also can testify other comrades' houses that he dwelt in. Comrade Sam Nujoma was visionary, and one such vision of his was when he brought the whole nation together to build the railway to Ondangwa. What a remarkable leader he was. And he was a pragmatic leader, charismatic leader, someone who believed in deeds, and someone who could dream very, very far. Comrade Sam Nujoma was not only concerned about his country, but also about Africa. One such example that we'll remember was when he and Comrade Mugabe decided to go and liberate DRC. Today, unfortunately so, DRC is at war, and we hope that for the sake of the true souls of those beautiful presidents of ours, that DRC will restore its peace. Let the nation be comforted during this time of the loss of a giant, indeed a tree that has fallen, and let the words of Nujoma keep resonating in our minds, that a nation united, or people united, striving for common good of all people of society, will always emerge victorious. And I believe that this mantra should carry us into a new government so that everyone in this country can feel that his common good is also attended to. In the words of our president-elect, we are too few to be poor. Let the economic emancipation for which Comrade Sam Nujoma fought so vigorously become a reality in Namibia so that every child in Namibia can sit at the table of brotherhood and enjoy the fruits of this country. I thank you.
The city of Windhoek has also expressed deep sorrow following the death of Namibia's founding president, Dr. Sam Shafishuna Nujoma, joining the nation in mourning for a leader whose vision shaped the country's independence and development. In a statement, the city hailed Dr. Nujoma as a revered statesman and visionary leader whose unwavering dedication to the liberation of Namibia laid the foundation for a democratic and prosperous Namibia. His legacy, deeply rooted in the nation's history, continues to inspire unity and progress. The city of Windhoek said Nujoma has immensely contributed to the development of Windhoek and the country at large. The statement says his vision for national growth and his tireless efforts to uplift all Namibians will never be forgotten. The city, on behalf of its leadership, employees and residents, extended heartfelt condolences to the Nujoma and Kondombolo families, the state and all citizens. And as the country reflects on the late founding president's contributions to Namibia's independence and its development, NBC News team went into the streets of Windhoek to hear from ordinary citizens. The legacy of late founding President Sam Nujoma continues to spark conversations across the nation and the impact he had on the country. NBC spoke to residents of Windhoek, especially those living in Okapale, informal settlement, and Ochomwise. Here is what they had to say about the leader who played such a significant role in shaping the nation's history.
As we grew up, our parents taught us a lot about him and taught us how they were led by him during the war. This news really touched us, especially for this country's independence.
Losing a great figure like Sam Nujoma in Africa or in Namibia is something very, we're supposed to call it a dark days to us, because he's the person whom we know that is the founding father of our country. At the same time, is the one who combined the soldiers from both sides.
The mayor of Swakopmund, Blasius Koraseb, on behalf of the residents of the coastal town, says they are grateful for the late father of the Namibian nation's exemplary leaders shown pre- and post-independence.
Yeah, on behalf of the Swakopmund Municipal Council and the entire Swakopmund community at large, we wish to express our heartfelt condolences on the passing of His Excellency Dr. Sam Nujoma, the founding President of the Republic of Namibia. Dr. Nujoma was instrumental in the liberation struggle of this country, and we will forever cherish and remember him for his visionary leadership and his commitment to justice, equality, and unity in the Namibian nation. So during this time of mourning, our thoughts and our prayers are with the Nujoma family, friends, and the entire Namibian nation. And as we salute our hero, we just want to say on behalf of Swakopmund, rest in peace, rest in vrede, kainde nawa, hamba kale, nasare. Thank you.
And that concludes the news highlights at this hour. Stay tuned for the special broadcast in memory of the late founding president and father of the Namibian nation.
When the enemy advance, you retreat. When the enemy retire, you attack. This is precisely what we did.
Welcome back. If you've only just joined us, you're watching NBC One, where we're still reflecting on the lifetime and leadership of the founding president of Namibia, Dr. Sam Nujoma. Now, as the first president of independent Namibia and the longest-serving leader of SWAPO, his legacy remains deeply embedded in the party's ideology and national consciousness. As we reflect on his contributions and enduring influence, we joined this afternoon by Dr. Charles Mobita, the rector of the SWAPO Party School. Dr. Mobita, good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
Good.
Dr. Mobita, Dr. Nujoma was not only Namibia's first president, but also the longest-serving leader of the SWAPO party. So how would you, to start with, describe, his role in shaping the party's ideology and direction as well over the past, couple of decades?
Well, Dr. Nujoma is a library on its own. It's not a chapter that you can read in a few minutes. To understand Dr. Nujoma, you need to read a lot more because his life was just too long. I first met him personally August 1976 when we were coming from our military training camp in Congo, Tanzania. And that was soon after the Shipanga rebellion. And he came to visit us before we were deployed to various frontline detachments and sections at the military front. He came to talk to us as new deployees. And he, a father figure, that was the first thing that I noticed. Because in his engagement, he told us we left our parents' home. We left our brothers, our sisters, our mothers and all. But we must be our own fathers, brothers to each other, mothers to each other, and uncles to each other. And that's when he basically started talking to us about the ideology of the SWAPO party, which basically hinges on three things: the solidarity amongst comrades, freedom that had to come no matter what, and we had to be ready to sacrifice in order to realize that freedom, and then democracy, in the sense that everything that we had to do, even if we were at the military front, we had to have that kind of national cohesion, that you don't do things to spite other people, do things by the book. So his ideology and philosophy, right at the beginning, was to ensure that he leads a united army. A united army that was at the battlefield, a united army at the diplomatic front, a united army at the political front. And the reason I say you cannot quantify Nujoma in a discussion of about 10 minutes or 15 minutes is simply because, look, he embarked on different phases. The first phase he made sure was to make sure that every Namibian that went into exile felt at home. So there was some kind of sanctuary that you felt at home even though you were not with your parents. So SWAPO basically became a home for every Namibian. Made you comfortable, whether you are deployed to the education centers, to school, or to the army, you felt at home through the spirit of comradeship. So that phase was to ensure that liberation is attained. He never wavered. He dared where others feared until we got political independence. After political independence, then he laid down a firm foundation that we need to embark on the second phase of the struggle, which is economic struggle. Now, the economic struggle is, many people would not understand, that it's a lot much tougher than the political struggle that we engaged, the independence struggle that we engaged in, because it requires the nation to be able to fully understand the predicament in which we are. We inherited a system that was not basically meant for us, but also we inherited a constitution. We came up with a constitution which, of course, is supposed to address the system that we inherited. But you cannot address that, in an aggressive or spontaneous or just, as a matter of time, say, now it's done. You can't. You have to do it gradually, but you need to understand, if you do it gradually, hunger will be attacking you. And hunger is one friend that never disappears. It's permanently there. So, look, he laid that foundation. And obviously, other leaders took over from there.
Yeah. Keeping our eyes focused on the SWAPO party, and of course he played a critical role, as you touched on, during the liberation struggle. But from an organizational perspective, what made him such a formidable leader in mobilizing the people and garnering international support?
Look, Nujoma was passionate about Namibia.
Yeah.
He was passionate about the Namibian people. Maybe if I could cite for you one story that happened, I think it was around 1965. Around 1965, there was...
So this would be prior to when you met him in 67?
Yeah, yes. There was a meeting in Ghana, which was attended by all the heads of state at that time. And at that meeting, it was the first meeting that was attended. I'm not sure about the year. I might be wrong about 65. It could be 64. But at that meeting, the president of Algeria was the first time that he attended that meeting. So he went there in his full battle regalia. And as they were coming out of the meeting, in front of the journalists, Commander-in-Chief Nujoma asked Ben Bella and said, and then the question was, why do you want the pistol? He says, because I want that pistol in order to liberate my country. Now that became a huge story for the South African media, the British media, BBC and whatnot, making fun of Nujoma. To say, how do you hope to liberate Namibia with a pistol? Because the South African is a formidable force, do you understand? But they could not understand Nujoma's philosophy. On that pistol, Nujoma saw an army. On that pistol, Nujoma saw the Namibian people rising up. And that was shortly before Ongulumbashe. Okay? So, and indeed, he was given the pistol, but that pistol then is the pistol that trained our, erstwhile commanders, right. The Nanyembas, the Hanyekos, and they were trained from that pistol in Egypt, and then it was moved over to Congo and Tanzania. It trained our people. So, understanding Nujoma, you need to understand his philosophy. And it's because of such kind of passion that Namibian people realized that they had a leader in Nujoma. So it was easy for Nujoma to galvanize and make sure that the people were united. Remember, people were in exile from different tribes, from different religious persuasions. They came from different types of, circles of Namibia. But he united the people. Many people that I meet today who were in exile, I never knew that this person was from this tribe. I never knew that. Because that is how we were taught by Nujoma. And that's how people became, so passionate about him. Started loving him for the man who he was.
Having known him for so many years, Dr. Mubita, are there any personal encounters or moments that stand out for you, reflecting today on his leadership, his wisdom, or even his personality behind the scenes?
Well, I should say I'm one of the few blessed people in terms of encountering our Commander-in-Chief. My first encounter, he was my Commander-in-Chief. I was in the Army, People's Liberation Army of Namibia, for about 3 years. But when I left the Army, I joined radio. And when I joined radio, I was basically in charge of all the 7 radio stations of SWAPO. So almost every Central Committee meeting, the outcome of Central Committee meeting, I had to do an interview with him. But that is only then. But there were a number of other engagements where I would sit and have an interview with him, including the last interview before he came back to Namibia. So yes, I there was that kind of connection between me and him because, you know, as a media person, there were times he would just call.
Yeah.
He would call Comrade Idibo and say, can you call Charles, please? I need to talk to the Namibian people. And I would run there with my UHA. You know, that time we used to be using UHA, not this sophisticated technology
that we have today.
Yes. So I would run there with my UHA and say, hey, Chief, what is it that you want to deliver?
Yeah.
And he would say, this is what I want to deliver. Yeah. So there was that kind of close bond. And obviously, after independence, again, here, I was still in the media.
Yeah.
So there was that connection between me and him. But the most latest of them all was when I basically was made to become the national coordinator of the SWAPO Party School. And then he inaugurated the SWAPO Party School. And he said to me, you know where the school, the political ideology school of the party school comes from, of the SWAPO Party. This thing of training our people ideologically started from way back, and I knew that. You were in charge of radio stations, so you know the role of ideology in our people. So that was something that he said to me personally, and I took it that, you know, the importance of the school is something that he believes, because he is of that school of thought that, you know, politics should lead the gun.
Yes.
The gun should not lead politics. So you need to, first of all, understand the ideology of the party, the politics of the party, before you can lift up a gun and start fighting.
Well, Mr. Mubita, we know that, of course, you're pressed for time, and we hope to have you back in the coming weeks. As we know, yesterday it was announced that Namibia is now under an official period of mourning. We're not sure yet how long that would be. But just in closing, as you leave us with this conversation, your message to Namibians as we find ourselves under these circumstances, mourning the loss of the country's founding father.
Well, my message is very simple and short, that the legacy that the Commander-in-Chief has left for us should be an inspiration for us to ensure that we achieve economic liberation by all means.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, there in conversation with us was Dr. Charles Mubita, the rector of the SWAPO Party School. We'll be back after this brief break. Stay with us.
Now we are just reinforcing it by providing education to our youth. Because education is the key to knowledge, so therefore every effort should be made by all Africans, those on the continent and those in the diaspora, to ensure that the future generation of the Africans are educated in different fields of economic endeavors. Our government have a policy on land redistribution to the entire population, irrespective of color or race or places of origin. The land belonged to the indigenous people. When white people came here, they came empty-handed, so the land belonged to us. I think Africa today is the richest continent on earth. We should strengthen the African Union more with a clear purpose of ensuring that in our lifetime, the United States of Africa will be implemented, where Africans will carry one passport with one president. Here in Namibia, we have the capacity to ensure that the peace and stability prevail in our country, and also to work hard to ensure that there is every Namibian child has food to eat and be able to go to school up to the university level. And that is the aim of the African Union, of course. Well, my message to the Namibian people is to remain united and maintain peace and stability and development. Because where there is no peace, there can be no development. So because I believe that a united people striving to achieve a common good for all members of the society will always emerge victorious. We must depend on our own resources on the continent.
In 1960, there was no People's Party of Angola whose revolutionary forces routed. I will not say much about hospitality in this territory. Therefore, comrades, we must be vigilant. Let us not to be deceived by. Viva! Viva South Africa! Viva! Viva Oliver Tambo! Viva! Viva Oliver Tambo! Viva! Comrades, first of all, on behalf of the SWAPO of Namibia and the SWAPO University of Namibia, I would like to express our sincere thanks to the UNIFI and the Zambian government for having organized this rally. That this arms French of 100,000 children who were demonstrating against a barbaric and a useless language, Afrikaans, which cannot be used anywhere Comrades, we believe that what has been intended by force can only be regained and restored by force.
Back. Angolan President João Lourenço sent a message of condolence to his Namibian counterpart, father of the Namibian nation, Sam Nujoma. Now, Namibia's excellent bilateral cooperation with Angola has always been characterized by a common vision and a desire to strengthen our cooperation in a wide range of sectors, covering political, diplomatic, economic, social, defense and security cooperation. Jovelina Imperial Costa, ambassador of Angola to Namibia, now joins us here this afternoon to reflect. Good afternoon.
Imperial Costa.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
for the invitation. Obrigada pelo convite formulado.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
I must also just inform our viewers, of course, that you'll be speaking to us through a translator, so they should just bear with us a little bit.
Eu vou informar os assistentes que estarão falando conosco através do intérprete, por isso pedimos a paciência deles.
Okay. Well, of course, as you're very well aware right now, Namibia's founding president is no more, but how would you describe how would Angola describe, the loss of a friend and brother of, Angola's southern neighbor?
Como do vosso conhecimento, o presidente fundador da Namíbia já não existe. Como é que Angola descreveria a perda do amigo e irmão para os vizinhos do Sul?
Angola descreve o desaparecimento físico do presidente Sam Nujoma como uma perda irreparável.
Angola considers the death of the founding president, Dr. Sam Nujoma, as an irreparable loss.
Angola sente pela perda do presidente Sam Nujoma da mesma forma que o povo da Namíbia sente esta perda.
Angola feels the loss of President Sam Nujoma the same way that the Namibian people feel the loss.
As relações entre Angola e Namíbia são relações que datam de antes da independência da Namíbia.
The relations between Angola and Namibia date during the years before the independence of Namibia.
Por isso, sentimos a perda de irmão,
That's why we feel the loss of a brother,
de amigo,
a patriot,
de
a friend,
camarada,
a comrade,
que conviveu com angolanos durante muitos anos.
That lived with Angolans for many years.
Na altura da luta de libertação.
During the years of the liberation struggle.
É uma perda irreparável.
It is an irreparable loss.
I want to talk about the relations between the two nations. Talk to us about the contributions between Namibia and Angola.
Eu gostaria de tocar nas relações entre as duas nações. Pode sublinhar as contribuições existentes entre Angola e a Namíbia?
Como eu disse anteriormente, as relações entre Angola e Namíbia são relações privilegiadas.
As I stated before, the relations between Angola and Namibia are privileged relations.
E são relações que datam de, como disse, de antes da independência da Namíbia.
That date before the independence of Namibia.
Essas relações, o presidente Agostinho Neto.
The relations were consolidated
quando
when
da luta
President
de libertação,
during the liberation struggle,
orientou-nos que
gave us an order
a continuação da nossa luta,
that
da luta de Angola,
of our
estava
struggle,
na
Namíbia,
no Zimbábue
Zimbabwe
e na África do Sul.
South Africa.
Por isso, nós levamos avante este legado do presidente Agostinho Neto.
That's why we embrace this legacy of President
acolhemos
Agostinho
os nossos irmãos namibianos.
And we welcomed our Namibian brothers.
Naquela altura em que precisavam de nós.
In the time that they needed.
Nós recebemos os nossos irmãos namibianos.
We welcomed our
numa fase muito difícil.
Namibian brothers in a very difficult
Devo referir
times.
que a Namíbia teve muitas bases em Angola.
Let me say that Namibia had many bases in Angola.
Faço referência ao Kwanza Norte.
I can refer to Kwanza Norte.
Faço referência ao Lubango.
I can refer to Lubango.
Temos referência também de Cassinga.
We also have reference Cassinga.
Hoje estamos a trabalhar para podermos inaugurar o monumento de Cassinga.
Today we are working
foi
hard
uma base muito importante
to make sure that we
da Namíbia,
inaugurate
em Angola,
the Cassinga Memorial.
da Huila.
It was a very important base.
E faço referência também à base da Namíbia que está até hoje em Luanda e que hoje é a embaixada da Namíbia em Angola.
I also want to state that where the Namibian embassy in Angola is constructed was an old base of Namibia in Luanda.
Neste momento, o edifício onde se encontra a embaixada da Namíbia em Angola foi a base principal dos nossos irmãos compatriotas namibianos
was the headquarters of our brothers and sisters Namibian compatriots in Angola.
E para complementar a nossa contribuição
na
libertação da Namíbia, nós temos o célebre Cuito Carnaval.
We have the well-known Cuito Carnaval.
Nós apoiamos a Namíbia na luta do Cuito Carnaval contra o regime do apartheid.
We supported Namibia in the Cuito Carnaval battle against the apartheid
na
system.
Qual também tivemos o apoio de Cuba.
For which we also had the support of Cuba.
E com o êxito desta batalha,
and with the success of this battle,
Namíbia conseguiu alcançar
Namibia
a independência.
Was able to attain its independence.
presidente Nelson Mandela foi libertado da cadeia.
President Nelson Mandela was set free from prison.
E os países da região da África Austral também foram libertados nesta época.
And of course, with the liberation of the Southern African countries.
Tudo isso devemos a nossa contribuição, a contribuição de Angola
all this
na
is
luta de
due
libertação
to our
da
contribution, the contribution of Angola for the liberation of Namibia,
a independência
which paved the way for Namibia's independence.
E esta relação de amizade, de solidariedade, de irmandade não ficou por aí.
And the relation of friendship, solidarity and brotherhood did not end there.
Hoje temos relações excelentes.
Today we have very excellent
São
relations.
relações que vão para além de relações de amizade.
Our relations go beyond the friendship relations.
Perceber que nós somos países de fronteira.
To consider that we are neighbor countries.
Uma fronteira comum.
We have a common border.
E obviamente que
it's obvious that
no âmbito desta fronteira existe inclusive relacionamento familiar.
We also have family
os nossos dois
relations,
povos.
family ties between our people.
Portanto, nós, Angola,
Angola,
temos a Namíbia como um país geoestratégico.
We have Namibia as our strategic partner in our relations.
Temos relações a todos os níveis
We have
de cooperação.
Agreements in all the levels of cooperation.
Demos salto muito grande no estreitamento dessas relações nos últimos tempos.
Advanced in our relations during
Obviamente,
the years.
iniciados no mandato do presidente Nujoma.
Of course, the relations started with the mandate of the late President Sam
E hoje
Nujoma.
fazemos todos os possíveis para que essas relações sejam cada vez mais estreitas.
And today we are working to make sure that our relations will be even strengthened further.
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, of course, Namibia and Angola enjoy excellent bilateral cooperation, and that's within a wide range of sectors.
Relações excelentes.
Political, diplomatic, economic, social, defense and security.
E segurança.
But what are the low-hanging fruits that Namibia and Angola can focus on to further deepen their relations?
Quais são as áreas que Angola e Namíbia precisam de olhar para estreitar ainda mais as relações existentes?
Nós precisamos, neste momento, de olhar um pouco mais para as relações econômicas.
At this moment, we need to focus more on economical relations.
Países que têm potencialidades econômicas.
The two countries, Angola and Namibia, have economic potentials.
O objetivo é efetivamente este:
and
fazer com que as nossas relações econômicas sejam cada vez mais estreitas.
To strengthen our
Demos
economic
alguns
relations.
avanços. Portanto, o ano passado
e no decorrer
dos anos
passados,
e aqui eu destaco, portanto, a visita da hoje vice-presidente da República da Namíbia e presidente eleita, doutora Netumbo Ndaitwah,
the Vice President of the Republic of Namibia,
se deslocou a Angola com uma grande equipa de empresários namibianos.
She went to Angola with
por formas a
group of Namibian business
ver,
people.
Constatar
They went to study,
as potencialidades que Angola tem
observe
do ponto de vista econômico, para que essas relações sejam mais estreitas.
From the
Conseguimos alguns feitos
to contribute to strengthening the relations.
Hoje nós temos portanto, a Comissão Bilateral Econômica entre Angola e Namíbia. É um processo que devemos continuar. Ainda não nos satisfaz.
It's a process that needs to be
Pensamos que podemos fazer mais.
We are not yet
estamos aqui, efetivamente, para fazer com que essas relações se estreitem cada vez mais.
The relations will be strengthened even further.
As relações de cooperação nas outras áreas decorrem o seu curso normal.
In other areas
sempre
in
foram
normal,
relações que tiveram uma grande prioridade.
These are relations that always
e
were
hoje,
prioritized.
Cada vez mais nós estreitamos essas relações.
Every time we keep
Estamos a falar
strengthening the relations.
Do ponto de vista de segurança,
talking in terms
do
of
ponto
security,
de vista de defesa,
defense,
do ponto de vista político-diplomático.
From the political and diplomatic point of view.
Os dois países têm feito movimentos político-diplomáticos a favor de cada dos dois.
Political and diplomatic movements to support
Portanto, são relações que nós vamos continuar a estreitar.
Relations that will continue strengthening.
Tudo para a satisfação das necessidades dos nossos dois povos
for
e países.
Us to be able to satisfy the needs of our people.
Fantastic. Well, earlier, of course, you also mentioned that with Angola joining hands with Namibia in its liberation struggle, Cuba was also a part of that friendship. And we do know that Cuba has now decided to also be in a period of mourning, as you know, to stand in solidarity with Namibians. So how will Angola honor Namibia's fallen hero?
Do Presidente Nujoma, o que Angola pretende fazer?
Nós estamos a nos preparar para podermos honrar com dignidade a memória do presidente fundador da Namíbia.
We are preparing ourselves so that we can honor the memory of the founding president of Namibia.
Mensagem do presidente João Lourenço.
We started with the message from President João Lourenço.
Outras diligências estão a ser preparadas.
Of course,
quer a nível de Angola,
things are being put in place
ao nível daqui do
country
país
level
Namíbia.
And
estamos
in
à
Namibia.
espera de algum sinal,
So
alguma comunicação do governo.
Instructions from the government,
para que efetivamente nós possamos
so
participar
we'll be able
e honrar com dignidade,
to honor with dignity,
portanto, o nosso presidente fundador,
departed founding president,
presidente fundador da Namíbia, mas também nosso
presidente fundador, founding president of Namibia, but is also president.
Estamos a nos preparar efetivamente para isso.
So we are preparing
Quando
ourselves
chegar a altura, vocês vão ver
for this. When the time arrives, of course, you'll see.
Está a honrar a memória.
You realize that we are honoring the memory of the founding president.
Before we let you go, any final remarks that you'd like to leave us with?
Antes de terminarmos a nossa entrevista, tem algumas palavras que gostaria de pronunciar.
Eu queria aproveitar a oportunidade.
Yes, I would like to use this opportunity
para, em nome da comunidade angolana que reside na Namíbia,
on behalf of the Angolan community residing in Namibia,
próprio,
in my own behalf,
dirigir a família enlutada,
to convey to the bereaved family,
o governo da Namíbia,
the government of Namibia,
ao povo namibiano,
and to the people of Namibia,
os nossos sentimentos de pesar, as nossas condolências,
our condolences
por esta perda irreparável,
for this loss, this irreparable loss,
e desejamos paz à sua alma e que descanse em paz.
We wish that his soul will rest in eternal peace.
Ambassador, muito obrigada.
Muito obrigada.
Okay.
Prevails in every age of the Republic of Namibia. Thank you. During this brief period, since our independence, we have been able to ensure peace within our borders, create confidence about the future among all Namibians, and set an agenda for reconstruction and democracy. All of this we have been able to do in spite of the recent past in Namibia characterized by conflict and bloodletting.
The Republic of Namibia has adopted a policy of mixed economy. That means we encourage joint venture. I have already signed an agreement with the OPEC in Washington when I was here 3 months ago. And in that, in fact, there is a guarantee now of the U.S. corporates as well as private investors to come and invest in Namibia. So the reason why we have adopted a policy of mixed economy, this would encourage us to create job opportunities to our people, as well as to develop our economy with the participation of the private sector from overseas as well as national business concern. It is very important to produce adequate food for the population, because we cannot afford to import foodstuffs from other countries. And second is water and rural development. Our country is a very dry country. It's always affected by droughts, and therefore we have to develop water canals and a pipeline from the Kunene and Zambezi rivers into the interior of the country.
In the name of our people, to declare that Namibia is forever free, sovereign, and independent. I thank you.
My sincere condolences to our former First Lady, Nekuru Ovamboland, as well as the entire Nujoma family. As you all know that Tatekulu, founding father, have been done everything well in Namibia, establishing many things in Namibia. So it is left a big impact in Namibia. Thank you very much.
The late president, the founding father, he passed away. So I should say to all the family, hard feelings, be good, and all Namibians, they know that the president was the founding father. 1990, 21st of March, was been swearing in as the first president of this country after South Africans. So what I can say is it did some things that happens in country. You know, we also lost our president, Hage Geingob. So rest in peace and we love you.
Passing of our founding father, Dr. Sam Savushinan Nujoma, and we are very saddened about that. I just wanted to send out the condolences to our founding First Lady, Madam Ovamboland, Nujoma, the children, and the entire nation. That's all I wanted to say. We are very saddened by the passing of our first president.
We are very sorry, we are grieving and feel the pain. The wife and kids that are left behind will stay in our hearts, and let it be a reminder to think about them all the time, as it was a legacy for us.
Good morning. I would just like to give my condolences to all Namibians for our founding father, the wife and the 2 sons. We are with you. We are with you in the prayers. We are praying for you. Be strong. All of us ahead of the passing away of our father. Thank you.
Although it saddens us, we must find solace and comfort in his passing. We need to accept that death is inevitable. We are sending hope and faith to his family.
Present. Good morning. I would like to wish the Nujoma family and the entire Namibia condolences for the passing of our founding president, Dr. Sam Nujoma. I would like to say the country must stay strong and let's continue the unity in Namibia. Thank you.
My condolences to the family of Dr. Sam Nujoma. I hope they have it and keep it on strong, because losing someone is not an easy thing, you know. So that it's just to keep strong, yeah.
As a Namibian, and let me just say, let me wish the family the strength that they need, and they must know that we are all behind them. We are together. We're one person, one people, one Namibia, one nation. We are together.
Welcome back. Now, in our next discussion, we delve into the multifaceted legacy of the late Dr. Sam Nujoma, his transformation from a freedom fighter to the nation's first president, and the ongoing influence of his leadership on modern-day Namibia. To discuss the legacy of the late founding father and Namibia's first president, Dr. Sam Nujoma, we're joined by political analyst Rui Chitende. Rui, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Nina.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, of course, a lot has been said over the last 2 days, and I think there's much more that can be said as well. And we're really trying to get, I don't know if saying a bird's eye view, but, you know, cover all angles of who this great statesman was, this family man, as many as referred to him as. Many of his peers have you know, referred to him as a father figure, which I find quite interesting because, you know, as the average Namibian, we never knew that side of him. And of course, today we're gauging your views as well. As I said, President Sam Nujoma was, you know, a pivotal figure in Namibia's fight for independence. How would you describe his leadership style, you know, during the liberation struggle, a period, of course, that I know you weren't a part of, but in your learned view, what are your sentiments?
Well, look, there is no shortage of agreement that the founding president was an icon of liberation, an icon of social justice, an icon of unity, and I can sum it up that he was actually the godfather of Namibian politics, pre-independence and post-independence. There will be no equal to Sam Nujoma. I mean, off record, we just spoke about by the time he stepped down as the founding president, I was in grade 11.
Right.
We were actually beneficiaries of his mantra of education for every Namibian child. And it was within that spirit that we got to know of Sam Nujoma, of course, through history lessons and also through conversations with our seniors in the house. And if you look at what he has done prior to independence, I just read an interesting story this morning about his legacy, where when he was in exile, he used to spend most of his time in hotel rooms because he was so busy advocating for Namibia's liberation from the yoke of apartheid. So that shows you and illustrates the kind of determination that he had to liberate Namibia. Post-independence, I think he had the most difficult task of governing Namibia, considering the fact that we have just emerged from a very violent past, and he had to unite all of the various factions, the political formations, the different races, the different ethnic groups that all didn't know where we were going as a country. And we don't give him enough credit for what he has done in that respect. His notion of what it is to be a Namibian. He didn't like people looking for handouts, rather it should be hands out, kind of approach to leadership. He was charismatic when he speaks. For someone that didn't have formal qualifications at an undergraduate level.
Extremely well spoken.
Extremely well conversed in conveying a message. He could lead people and people will willingly follow. So that's the kind of leader that he was. And I think many Namibians will emulate his leadership style. I hope we do as a country during this dark period. And it's rather unfortunate that President Bumba had to be the one with the moral and political obligation to announce the death of two statesmen. President Geinkop, that we lost during the same period last year, and now founding President Sam Nujoma, and these were both his comrades. I think it's also a difficult time for him, and I would also like to extend my deepest condolences to the family, to the Nujoma family, his grandchildren, his children, and the entire Namibian populace.
Thank you so much, Duri. You also mentioned to me that you had engaged some international media houses who also wanted to, of course, get your 2 cents and your thoughts on the life and legacy of Namibia's founding president. In your conversations that you've had with them, your interactions you've had with them, and you'll have some more, what is your sort of understanding or gist of what their thoughts on Namibia's founding president was?
Well, look, the founding president was an internationally known figure. And I think he was one of the most influential leaders in Southern Africa and in Africa because of his stance on Pan-Africanism, having this united vision for Africa with the likes of Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, the Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Samora Machel of Mozambique, Eduardo dos Santos Agostinho Neto of Angola, Robert Mugabe of Mugabe. So he was part of this creme de la creme of Southern African liberation movements that were at the forefront of advocating for the complete and utter liberation of African countries. And 2 years ago, I was in Germany, in Berlin. In fact, wherever I go outside of Namibia, people always ask me, how is the founding president, Sam Nujoma? Is he still okay? I said, yeah, he's in good spirit. He exercises. He's so passionate about the vision that he has crafted for Namibia. And I think his persona actually transcended beyond the body politic of Namibia. He was well known. And of course, there were also those that criticize him for a litany of things, whether you agree or disagree with them. And I think no individual is perfect. The only person that is perfect is the person that has not been born yet.
Rui, what were, in your opinion, some of his most defining qualities as a revolutionary leader?
I think it was his ability to be decisive, whether you agreed with the decision that he makes or not. You can remember the time where we had the controversial amendment to the Constitution to grant him a 3rd term. There were some voices within government, within the party, even some of his close comrades that said, no, comrade, you can't do this. We're a democracy, but he was able to persuade them one way or another, and he got his 3rd term. Interestingly enough, that amendment only applied to him. So we didn't have another statesman that was in power for more than 2 terms. It ended with him. But overall, one thing that one can also talk about the legacy of the founding president is that he was very adamant and passionate about unity in diversity. The whole one Namibia, one nation. And that actually was reflected in his first cabinet, because he also appointed people that were not part of the governing party, SWAPO. He appointed people from the opposition, people from different ethnic groups, people from different races. So it shows you the kind of vision that he had for the country, because he was cognizant of the heterogeneous nature of the even if it's a copy from South Africa, Rainbow Nation. And I think as a country, for the past, we're going now for 35 years, we actually need to applaud ourselves, despite the challenges that we have. We need to applaud ourselves as being one of those African countries that has not seen the emergence of violent conflict post-independence.
100%, 100%. What lasting political systems or policies did Nujoma implement that are still in place today?
Well, key amongst them would be Vision 2030. And the policy documents that would allow Vision 2030 to be realized, which is the NDPs, the National Development Plans.
Right.
As to whether they have been a success, it's up for debate. We also know that he was very fond of young people ascending to the corridors of power. That's why he appointed the current Prime Minister at the tender age, was it 26, 29, to be the Director General of the National Planning Commission, Angola-Namibia. So it showed you the kind of leader that he was, the faith that he had in young people. And I also think other leaders emulated that from him, even though it was not to the extent where they were appointed in prominent position to have a meaningful impact on society.
Of course, we shared that, the former president, Dr. Sam Nujoma, was the president of our youth, my youth as well. And of course, we have, fond memories of him. And so far, you've highlighted, of course, yes, there are opposing views or opinions on him, but your reiteration so far has been really positive in terms of what he stood for, his leadership, and the legacy that he's left Namibia behind. But do you think that, there were areas in his leadership where he might have fallen short?
Well, I think your previous question was on the policy initiatives that he pursued or that he introduced. I think key amongst them was the policy of national reconciliation. I would like to call it the politics of national reconciliation, because the main idea was that despite the fact that we have been embroiled in this violent conflict pre-independence, we are now an independent country, so those crimes that have been committed then, we will forgive each other and forge a national identity. But there are still other people that feel that their wounds have not healed completely. Because reconciliation is about mending broken relationships and ensuring that violent conflicts are managed peacefully. That is the ultimate objective of conflict resolution. There was the issue of the Lubango dungeons. Some people still feel that there are cousins that have disappeared in Angola, their mothers, their brothers, the detainees that were under the management of SWAPO. Those crimes have not been answered. So if you're talking about reconciliation, you need to have a meaningful dialogue like the one that was had in South Africa, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And I think that's where he fell short. And also under his leadership, when the notion of black economic empowerment came in, many people felt that the cake was only distributed amongst a few people. Not everyone was able to benefit from it. And that still persists till today. We can go on and on, but I think for now, since we are mourning the founding president as Africans, we need to look at his legacy, because if we only focus on the positive, we are not really telling a true reflection of what he stood for. As I said earlier, no human being is perfect. But we need to know him and give credit where it's due.
In hindsight, Rui, hindsight is such a beautiful thing. How would you summarize, Sam Nujoma's overall impact, not only on Namibia, but also on Africa?
Well, Sam Nujoma, his vision for Pan-Africanism was bold, it was courageous, and it was something that he always thought that Namibia belongs to all Africans. One of his famous speeches, because he knew that the struggle was so difficult and bitter, and Namibians, especially the leadership of SWAPO and other political formations, they were hosted by countries like Angola, like Zambia, like Tanzania. Countries like Sweden provided support, so did Cuba. So he thought that we are actually indebted to these countries. So once we become independent, there's no way we can claim Namibia for ourselves, because where we are today is because of others. It's the typical Ubuntu analogy, that I am because of others. Hence, I need to reciprocate in whatever possible way what others have done for me. And I think we lack that in today's society, not only in the political space, but in the social space as well. We tend to pursue this independent-minded kind of approach to how we conduct things, but that's not who we are as Africans. We are who we are because our community constructed us that way.
Is there a particular lesson, you know, from his leadership that political leaders today could learn from?
Humbleness, humility. If you can recall, Nina, there was a time in the late 90s that President Nujoma traveled to Angola to go and meet Chief Kapika about the hydro dam. And, you know, he was actually, the Chief Kapika was very critical of Nujoma. But, you know, he just smiled and he listened. This was the head of state being addressed by a traditional leader. It was very critical of Sam Nujoma. But he didn't castigate him back. He treated Chief Kapika with respect. He actually persuaded him on numerous occasions as to the value of the dam to the community of Angolan. And that tells you something about the character of who Nujoma was. Humility, being humble, being able to speak to the ordinary person, and just allowing that division of the hierarchy of power not to be there. And I think that's something remarkable in him that we hardly talk about.
As a renowned political analyst in Namibia, Rui, and possibly, of course, outside of Namibia as well, what are some of your personal lessons that you've drawn from the life and leadership of founding President Dr. Sam Nujoma?
One thing that I have emulated from Sam Nujoma's leadership style in terms of his character is that one should always treat other human beings, no matter your seniority, as a human being first of all. Don't ask for their positions. Treat them for who they are, and be candid about what you say. And people always tended to say, Nujoma was loved and he was feared. But I think he was loved more than actually feared. But as a leader, sometimes you need to instill discipline, and people tend to confuse that as fear.
Yes. Rui, we really appreciate your time with us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're most welcome.
Thank you. Well, we'll be back shortly after this brief break. Do stay with us here on MBC One. Well, if you've only just joined us, we are, of course, throughout the day, we have been engaging different men and women from all walks of life concerning the life, time and leadership of Namibia's founding president and founding father, as he's fondly known, Dr. Sam Nujoma. Of course, our conversations still continue for a bit this afternoon. We're going to take a brief break. When we come back, we continue with our discussions.
I was born here at the Ongara, the old house was there. This house was there, not where it is now. And I grown up here. I used to cultivate with my parents, as you see my hangu there. And my first task was to look after cattle. I go to the cattle post. Sometimes I even go to Ombuga Hamteta Komatango to Kwambi area with our cattle while I was just 14 years old. If I build a clinic here and a school, it will be good for the local people not to travel a long way, a longer distance. Even the comrades from the Republic of Angola are coming to join us here, so I welcome everybody.
Our first step should therefore to start with a review of some constitutional provision in order to address land ownership in the country. For this reason, the Constitution of the Republic of Namibia is to be amended through a referendum. It is only this way that the state can own the entire land in the country, including the agricultural commercial land. Indeed, I strongly believe that land should belong to the state, and no foreigners should be allowed to own commercial land in Namibia. This is what we agreed upon in the first National Land Conference, and that mechanism should be put in place to speed up the expropriation of, without compensation, of land belonging to the absentee landlord. However, there are those who are suggesting that such commercial farmland owned by foreigners should be expropriated in the public interest, provided that a fair and a just compensation is given for the infrastructural development that has taken place on the farm. Similarly, the first National Land Conference resolved that, given the difficulties in redressing ancestral land claims, restitution of such claims in full.
Every child must attend the school in the country, because education is the key to knowledge. This is the key to power.
In the name of our people, to declare that Namibia is forever free, sovereign, and independent. I thank you.
In 1950, there was no People's Party of Angola whose revolutionary forces routed. I will not say much about hospitality that about in this territory. Therefore, comrades, we must be vigilant. Let us not to be deceived by. Viva! Viva South Africa! Viva! Viva Oliver Tambo! Viva! Viva Oliver Tambo! Viva! Comrades, first of all, on behalf of the SWAPO of Namibia and the SWAPO University of Namibia, I would like to express our sincere thanks to the UNIFI and the Zambian government for having organized this rally. That this arms French of 100,000 children who were demonstrating against a barbaric and a useless language, Afrikaans, which cannot be used anywhere else. Comrades, we believe that what has been intended by force can only be regained and restored by force.
First of all, there must be peace and stability. And this starts with the respect of our traditional leaders. And then all of our elders, and especially women, so that we are able to proceed with the peace and stability in our country. Our aim and objective for the SWAPO party is to ensure that we eradicate poverty, disease, and the ignorance from the face of our country and that of the continent of Africa as a whole. Because we are members of the African Union, and we have to make a contribution with everything possible to ensure that there is peace and stability on the African continent. And there can be no peace if there is poverty. Well, I call upon all the Namibians to respect our elders, to respect His Excellency President Haki Geigo and all our ministers, and to ensure that peace and stability prevails in every age of the Republic of Namibia. I thank you.
During this brief period, since our independence, we have been able to ensure peace within our borders, create confidence about the future among all Namibians, and set an agenda for reconstruction and democracy. All of this we have been able to do in spite of the recent past in Namibia characterized by conflict and bloodletting.
The Republic of Namibia has adopted a policy of mixed economy. That means we encourage joint ventures with our government and private sector. I have already signed an agreement with the OPEC in Washington when I was here 3 months ago. And in that, in fact, there is a guarantee now of the U.S. corporates as well as private investors to come and invest in Namibia. So the reason why we have adopted a policy of mixed economy, this would encourage us to create job opportunities to our people as well as to develop our economy with the participation of the private sector from overseas as well as national business concern. It is very important to produce adequate food for the population because we cannot afford to import foodstuffs from other countries. And second is water and rural development. Our country is a very dry country. It's always affected by droughts, and therefore we have to develop water canals and a pipeline from the Kunene and Zambezi rivers into the interior of the country.
School is specifically meant for indigenous people who are working in a white-owned farm. The African children or their children don't go to school, while the whites they take their children to schools in towns, and they leave the black children whose parents are working for these white people.
Well, one more conversation that we were hoping to bring you today was with a Namibian politician and Member of Parliament, Mike Kavekotora, who is also president of the RDP. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to join us today, but we do hope in the passing days and weeks we will be able to engage him. Now, as Namibia is mourning the passing of the late founding president, Dr. Sam Nujoma, many took to social media, of course, to express what they felt and their sentiments and thoughts on him. Of course, all our interactions will be partly up on our Facebook page and as well as on YouTube, so you can catch the streaming over there and also look at all the news concerning this momentous time that Namibia currently finds itself in. We'll be posting all the relevant information on our NBC digital news pages on Facebook and across all our other social media platforms. I'd like to read some comments from some of the Namibians, because I know a lot of us feel very sentimental about the founding father of the nation. As I mentioned in one of our previous interviews, he to me was also the president of my youth, and so we have very fond memories of him. So I'd like to give these individuals an opportunity to express their sentiments to the rest of the nation. So if you go on our NBC digital news platform on Facebook, a message from Haindongo Dupanuka Dinelao, she says, "We didn't know Namibia before your existence. We are who we are today because of your wisdom, your perseverance, and your command. Rest in peace." Bernadette Moshosho writes, "Rest in peace, my president. Used to follow him in Luanda Radio Saki or broadcasting." So that was obviously many, many years ago. Ngoki Kawoko wrote a message, very short one, saying, "Rest in eternal peace, son of the soil." And Valentine O'Haran also a similar message, "May our founding president's soul rest in peace." Riso Nangolo also shared their sentiments, writing, "Rest in peace, comrade founding father Sam Shafishuna Nujoma. God bless your soul and may your legacy live on." Douglas Tembo penned a message as well. He writes, "These are the leaders worth mentioning about true liberation struggle of Africa." And he also attached a very iconic picture of the founding father there as well. Mandi Mabasen Pinar message is very short but sweet and says, "He fought the good fight." Nali Bwalala wrote, "He was indeed a blessing to the Namibian nation and to the entire Africa at large. Go well, father of the nation." And of course, today in our conversations, that was also the sentiments of some of our guests, that not only was he such a stalwart within the Namibian political sphere, but also meant a lot to Africa at large as well. V. Lavrov wrote, "Even in the next world, I still want to be Namibian. Rest in peace, founding father. You have given us enough to remember you by." Samuel Nginamwani wrote, "Rest in peace, uncle. Until we meet again, we did enjoy your time as leader. Go well." Monty Karwaihe, short and sweet as well. "The greatest Namibian," she says, and thank you at the end. Ketloe Donald Sokokwene wrote, "Rest in peace, visionary father of the nations." Of course, there's many, many more comments from Namibians as we are in this period of mourning at the loss of the founding president of Namibia, Dr. Sam Nujoma. As I mentioned, we'll be keeping you informed on all our platforms, that is across television as well as radio, so you can go onto the NBC pages on Facebook, that is as well as LinkedIn, that is as well as Instagram. There'll be links all over the place, and in parts of our sessions we will be streaming live across our YouTube as well. We know that many of us are on the go, so if you'd like to keep up with what's happening and watch the interactions live, you can do so by downloading the NBC Plus app if you haven't done that already, to keep up to date with what's happening on our programs. We've come to the end of this afternoon session. We'll be bringing you more conversations, more updates as they're happening on the hour. From myself and the team, it's goodbye for now. Thank you so much for being with us.